Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Geelong Zone. Very interesting video today. I've had a lot of debate about this video that I'm making, and we'll get into it in a little bit. But I just want to put a claimer out there that in no way I'm disrespecting either Jimmy Bartel or Nick Riewoldt. I think they are tremendously great players. Not good, great. They both played over 300 games. You know, contrary to what people think about Nick Riewoldt saying, "Oh, he's injury prone," he played over 300 games. He only had one real bad injury in his career, which was way back in 2004 with that shoulder reconstruction. Apart from that, he was very versatile. So, and I'm going to prove that in this video as well. But yeah, at no point I'm disclaiming or discrediting Jimmy Bartel or Nick Riewoldt. This is just a throwback concept trade. Depending on how this goes, I might actually make more of these comparisons and see how we go. But today's video will be about, would you trade Jimmy Bartel for Nick Riewoldt? And I was debating how I would do this. How would it be fair for both players? Jezza says, "Hey mate," hello Jezza. I was debating how would this trade be fair for both players. So I thought, right, I'm gonna do Jimmy Bartel's. Fuck no, Jimmy is my favorite all time. I'm gonna, to make it fair for this trade, I'm going to do Jimmy Bartel's best year and compare that to Riewoldt. So in my opinion, Jimmy's best years, statistically, I'm talking about statistically, were from 2006 to 2011. So 2006, runner-up in the Kaji medal, 2007 Brownlow medal, all the way to 2011 where he won the Norm Smith medal. So those are the years I'm going to compare. So that for me. Yeah, and he played over 300 games as well, Jezza. So I'll pin that as well. Can you name the other five? Dustin, I think Dustin Martin is one. Gary Ablett, I believe, Junior. No, I don't think Gary ever won a Norm Smith. I don't think Gary actually won a Norm Smith. I know one of them was definitely Dustin Martin. Can you name the other five? So I can name the other one. So you can tell me the other four. Jezza. Dusty, Hurd, Judd, Simon Black, and Greg Williams in Carlton. Chris Judd, Simon Black, and Greg Williams. There you go. I knew Dusty was one of them. I said Ablett, but Ablett never actually won a Norm Smith, did he? Well, junior anyway. Senior did, where he kicked all those goals against Hawthorn in '89. But back to this video. Great list. Yeah, they are champion players. All of them are very versatile in their own way, especially Hurd and Dusty. They could play numerous positions. James Hurd and Dusty, actually, James Hurd played later in his career up forward, just like Dusty did a bit. Though Dusty was a bit more explosive than James Hurd. James Hurd was just a magician with the ball, probably compared to the other ones. Judd was just a magnificent player. Simon Black was clinical. Greg Williams was very versatile as well, a very skillful, clean player. So they're all different. So back to this video. In my opinion, Bartel's best years was from 2006 to 2011. So we are going to compare those years to Nick Riewoldt's years. Remember when he took that crazy running back? Yeah, that in the same week Bartel took a similar one against the Dogs. The mark became so underrated because of Nick's that same week. So between 2006 and 2011, this was Jimmy Bartel's accolades or achievements or honours. whatever you want to call it, one-time Brownlow medalist, two-time AA All-Australian, one-time Norm Smith, 2006, 07, and 2009 runner-up in the Kaji medal. He never won it. But runner-up 3 times is pretty good considering you've got Gary Ablett in your team who won who won 2 of those. Joe Corey also won one of those in those years. And in fact, I think Gary Ablett and Joe Corey actually tied for 1 year. So Joe Corey is actually a 2-time Kaji medalist as well, which is incredible. 2006 was peak Jimmy. So we are going to compare those years. There's no point me comparing Riewoldt's years before that because that's not fair on Jimmy Bartel. So these were Nick Riewoldt's stats between those 2 years. Right, he didn't win a Coleman during those years. He had forwards like Favola, Fraser Garrick, who was actually Nick Riewoldt's teammate, Lance Franklin, a young Lance Franklin. So it was hard for Riewoldt, and Riewoldt really wasn't that one-on-one player anyway. He was more like a Jeremy Cameron today. He would take a lot of marks, especially late in his career. He'd go up the wing and take a lot of marks, almost like that linchpin. He was 4-time All-Australian, though. That's pretty impressive. 3-time best and fairest when you've got a midfield stack like Lenny Hayes in there. A 2-time leading goal kicker for the Saints, not Coleman, just for the Saints. When you've got Fraser Garrick in that team as well. Jimmy could play anywhere on the ground. Yeah, Jimmy started his career up in the midfield, then he went half forward, then he went half back. So he was very, very versatile. Riewoldt, late in his career was more of a linchpin half forward player, a bit like Jeremy Cameron, would push up forward, which was pretty good as well. So those years there. So I'm ignoring what Riewoldt did pre-2026 and post-2011 because that's not fair on Jimmy Bartel. Though they did play around the same time. They did play around the same amount of games. Jimmy Bartel managed to play over 300 games. So did Nick Riewoldt. As I said, contrary to what people actually think, Nick Riewoldt was never injury prone. He played over 300 games in a more tougher league than it is today, with all due respect. So he was not injury prone by any means. So who benefits from this trade? Who's the one that gets the most from this trade? In order for me to do that, I need to compare stats from post 2011 until they retired. And this was Nick Riewoldt's. This was Nick Riewoldt after 2011. Before we do, Jimmy better on field and off field. Riewoldt was, I think, the captain until the last year of his career, I think. So this was. No, sorry, that was Bartel. This was, this was Nick Riewoldt after 2011. So this is, if the trade happened, this is the Nick Riewoldt you would get in this trade with Jimmy Bartel. 1-time club champion, so best and fairest, which was pretty good. 2014, 2-time leading goal kicker in 2013 and 16 for St Kilda, not Coleman, but for St Kilda. An All-Australian in 2014. That is pretty impressive. That's a pretty impressive CV. If we go to Jimmy Bartel, I've actually got nothing because Jimmy Bartel never really did anything statistically good after those years. He never finished runner-up in the Kaji medal after 2011. He never got an All-Australian. He never got any kind of accolade after that. He was just a solid 24-round player, very solid 24-round player. You put in the team, first in the team, but he never really did anything like that. So Riewoldt kicked 47-plus goals between the year 2012 and 2014. He was the league leader in marks between 2013 and 2014. He actually led the league in marks. This is where I said later in his career he would push up more to the wing and take more marks, which is pretty impressive, when you're going to the later stages of your career. So there's no doubt if that trade happened, and this is all hindsight, it's 50-50, you can't predict the future. Geelong would benefit more from this trade than St Kilda. St Kilda would lose one of their best forwards of all time. Geelong had a young Tom Hawkins, who turned out to be a Hall of Famer, a legend at Geelong Football Club, no doubt about that. But apart from Hawkins, it wasn't, Cam Mooney was in the later stages of his career. So you would get still a prime Nick Riewoldt alongside Tom Hawkins. Now, from 2011 to 2017, where Nick Riewoldt retired, Geelong didn't win any flags. Not one flag. Didn't even make a grand final. Neither did St Kilda. St Kilda didn't do anything after that. So that he had a Brownlow premiership and Riewoldt had donuts. Yeah, that's true. That is absolutely true. That's true in his career. But we're talking about after 2011. Nick Riewoldt was the much better player than Jimmy Bartel after 2011. Geelong would benefit more from that trade than St Kilda. And if you're St Kilda, why the hell would you take that trade? I think every fan would be pissed, to be honest. No disrespect to Jimmy Bartel, but Nick Riewoldt was more versatile at that age than Jimmy Bartel. I remember Jimmy Bartel had some injury problems in not the year that he retired, but the year before that. He had a couple of injury problems. He only played a handful of games. So yeah, that's true. He said that's true. I can agree with that. So Nick Riewoldt had a better 2011 to when he retired, 2017. So the year that Riewoldt, we're going to go back to here, so it's not confusing. I'm going to bring it up. So Nick Riewoldt was a leading goal kicker at the club in 2016. Jimmy Bartel only played 9 or 10 games that year. He had a horrible. I don't remember the injury. I'm sure you can let me know, Jazelenko. But that was also Nick Riewoldt's last year as captain, and also he retired the next year in 2017. But we're going to go here. Where is this here? But from 2012 to 2014, so 3 years, he kicked 47 goals plus in those 3 years, and then led the league in marks because he was more a linchpin type forward. He'd press up more. He'd take marks on the wing. St Kilda around that time never really had a good forward anyway. They never, during those premiership years, well, he wouldn't have won a premiership, but during those grand final years, players like Michael Gardner, Justin Karitzky, no disrespect, but they were not great forwards by any means. Michael Gardner was a good ruck, but they weren't great players. They weren't Nick Riewoldt. They weren't a Tom Hawkins. Even if St Kilda had a Cameron Mooney in that year, where Riewoldt was playing after Garrick retired, that would have been very, very handy for Nick Riewoldt. So that's what you would do. So I don't think there's no way in hell St Kilda would take that trade. With all due respect to Jimmy Bartel, because Jimmy Bartel never really did anything significant. He was just a very solid player. Great player, not a good player, great player, but he was solid, but he didn't do much. He wasn't like he would, poll well in the Brownlow after those years. I think in 2014, in 2016, I think Riewoldt polled 15 votes in that year, which is incredible considering the next year he retired. So who wins the trade? In my opinion, if that happened, it'd be Geelong. Now, the question is, would Geelong win more premierships benefiting that trade? We don't know. Geelong never made it to a grand final after those years. The premiership win came when Chris got, what was the year? 2022. When they bet the smashed Sydney Swans. Riewoldt well retired before then, but they never made a grand final. If that trade happened, didn't happen, which it didn't, Geelong never made a grand final during those years. Neither did St Kilda. St Kilda, they played Collingwood twice in the grand final, the real one and then the replay the next week, so 2. And then they played Geelong. They lost 3 of them, but they never got back. They never recovered from that. Also, what you need to take in consideration is that 2 different coaches, 2 different tactics. St Kilda with Ross the Boss was a defensive coach, a defensive system during those years. So Riewoldt had to adapt to that. It would have been frustrating as hell. Absolutely frustrating. Jimmy did his knee, had a foot problem after, yeah. So he got a little bit injury prone in the year before he retired. He only played 8 or 9 games. So versatility, you would have got more from Riewoldt for longer, despite what people think about him being injury prone. Because it was only 2004 when he had his shoulder reconstruction. That was the only year really Riewoldt got injured. So you would have got a lot more from Riewoldt. He made, like I said here, he was leading goal kicker for St Kilda in 2016, the year before he retired. So in my opinion, if you're a Geelong fan, yes, you would take this trade. As much as we all love Jimmy Bartel, you would take this trade because Nick Riewoldt was the far better player, more versatile, would get more games from his career, and got arguably a little bit better than Jimmy Bartel at that point of his career. Like I said, Nick Riewoldt led the league in marks. He pushed up the wing. Usually when you get to that age, you stay deeper and deeper. But Riewoldt went higher and higher. He wanted to be like a ringman, a bit like Matthew Richardson in the twilight of his career, when he almost won that Brownlow. Pushed up to the wing, took a lot of marks, kicked a lot of goals. Yeah, and that's another good point. Yeah, Riewoldt would have had better players around him in Geelong too. They play a more attacking brand than what St Kilda did, so he probably would have scored more goals. Hell of a lot more goals. Ross the Boss, we all know his defensive tactics. 4 grand finals, didn't win one. The fourth one was with Freo. But Nick Riewoldt, after Fraser Garrick retired, did not have any forwards to work with. Yeah, he had Stephen Mill, but they're small forwards. Tom Hawkins had Stevie Johnson. So, but as far as other, like a 4 forward, Michael Gardner and Justin Karitzky, really? That's all they had? When Geelong won that premiership in 2022, Hawkins had a Cameron. Hawkins had a Dangerfield that went up forward occasionally. Hell, if you said to Nick Riewoldt during those years between 08 and 10, you're going to get Dangerfield just as a forward, that'd be so much better than Karitzky and Gardner. Though Gardner did kick a winning goal against us. I think it was the 09 season under the dome, kicked the winning goal. But he was average to good. Certainly wasn't a Patrick Dangerfield going up forward. Imagine the delivery he would have getting at Geelong would have kicked over. Yeah, well, yeah. Of course he would have. After 2011, so let's bring this here. 2011. So Nick Riewoldt had to compete with Lance Franklin, Tom Hawkins. Lance Franklin was probably arguably the best forward in the game. A little bit Brendan Favola, a little bit, but then Brendan had his own problems as we know. Up at Brisbane. But there is no doubt Nick Riewoldt was a top 3 in forwards. There's no question about that at that time. Now I know the rest of the Footscray were also very good around that era, but they never had a real dominant forward. You know, they had a power midfielder, Adam Cooney, Scott West. But to this point, we'll get who benefits from this trade. There's no doubt. Pressure points. Pressure points, Stephen. Yeah. That's where it kind of went downhill, didn't it? Well, it was going downhill since then, but well before that, but killed his career. I think that was from the Chris Judd chicken Scott. Yeah, well, Scott West. How did? I'll pin this, but yeah, I think that was a relation of the chicken wing tackle by Chris Judd. That's what started that. Scott West. How did that guy never win a Brownlow? There was a game that I actually looked into this a few months ago. So I think that year, Shane Roden, where Scott West came runner up, Shane Roden won the Brownlow medal. Like, no disrespect, but yeah, I wouldn't call Shane Roden had the best career. He was probably a one-hit wonder. There was a game where Scott West polled. That's disgusting. Yeah, sorry. Oh no. Yeah, no. Disgusting that I said that about Shane Roden, or he actually winning a Brownlow. No, there was a game where Scott West took 35 touches in one game. He got 0 votes for that game. 0. 35 touches. I think it was one of the earlier rounds. It was a few months ago that I looked up on this, but he had 35 touches in a game and got 0 votes in that game. Oh boy. Oh, I'm dreading this. I'm dreading this one here. Leave Jimmy alone. One of our all-time greats. Well, I'm not debating that. Wouldn't trade him for anyone. Well, that's just now being silly. And not for riewoldt. Then we have no J-Pod and Hawk developers much. Just no for this trade. Well, with all due respect, J-Pod Ziadli was no Nick riewoldt. With all due respect. And J-Pod went to Adelaide anyway. Arguably, J-Pod was better at the Crows than Geelong. Or gave Crows more versatility than he did in Geelong. Roden winning it was disgusting. J-Pod was average, says Footy Burner Jezza. But, you know, Jimmy, that's just a bad take. I'll just explain for the last 20 minutes that you'd take this trade all day long. The only one that wouldn't take this trade is St Kilda fans. Riewoldt, after 2011, had a much better career than Jimmy Bartel. Statistically, if you want to go by stats. Yep, Jimmy Bartel was probably more solid from rounds 1 to 24 than Nick riewoldt, more consistent on a game-to-game basis. But Nick riewoldt had the better career after that. And I'm not counting what Nick riewoldt did before 2026 because that's not fair on Jimmy Bartel. And Nick riewoldt before 2006, you know, all Australian, leading goal kicker. What's the best and fairest? But the faded Jimmy, I left that out. Bartel is my GOAT all time. I still have to agree with Lucas here. Yeah. Now, if I said you get riewoldt from 2006 to 2011 in exchange for Bartel, then you'd say probably not, because statistically Bartel was better. Norm Smith, Brownlow, 3-time runner-up in the BNF, the Kaji medal. But after 2011, there's no doubt you take that trade. But Jimmy has a decade. We're not. Like I said at the start of the video, we're not discrediting Jimmy Bartel. Great career, not a good career, a great career. excellent career. 300 games plus. Jezelenko at the start of this show said there's only 5 other players that Norm Smith, Brownlow, 300 games. Judd, Hurd, Dusty, I said Dusty, Greg Williams. Hall of Fame names. Legend status names. Well, should be. I don't know if they're going to give Hurd legend status because of what happened with Essendon and the scandals they've had. I'd be disappointed if they didn't. To be honest, like with Ablett Senior, I cannot believe he's not a legend. He hasn't got legend status. That's disgraceful. One of six. Sorry. Yeah. But all great names, all legend status names. And Dusty will be a legend status. You know, there's no doubt about that. It's one of the greatest ever. It's probably the greatest ever finals players ever. Not one, the. Especially on grand final day. It's very painful to see. I think for my next concept trade, for my next throwback, I might actually do Dustin Martin and Patrick Dangerfield. I might actually do that. The Dusty has hurt us a lot, especially that grand final. So if your opinion is to do that trade, I disagree. Jimmy's versatile. Well, I said that. I said that. Jimmy, he plays in more spots than what Riewoldt did. You know, Jimmy started as a midfielder, then half forward, then went half back. So there's no doubt about that. Riewoldt was a star. Absolutely, you robbed Peter to pay Paul. Well, fair enough, Jimmy, but we can only go by stats. No, they're not playing anymore, sadly. But I think that might be my next concept throwback. It would trade Patrick Dangerfield for Dustin Martin. That actually might be a very good video. I actually really enjoyed this video. I actually enjoyed the feedback from people. Be interesting to compare Dusty's prime years, which are probably those grand finals, to Dangerfield's prime years. That'd be very interesting. That'd be a very interesting discussion. But that's not what this video is. That could be the next video. But anyway, thank you all. 28-minute video. Like I said, I don't plan for these to go this long. This was supposed to be a quick debate. But anyway, thank you all for the comments. I really do appreciate it. Really enjoyed doing this video. And yeah, maybe we'll see a Dusty and Dangerfield throwback what if. That'd be very, very interesting. Pick one. Oh, hang on, before we go. Footy Burner said that would be very tough. Factual Opinion says pick one player from our 2011 side to bring back. Yeah, probably Jimmy Bartel. The irony of that. How dare I do that? How dare I say that? How dare I say that? No, you got to. Of course, you got to bring back Gary Ablett, Junior. You know that's just a given. Have to bring back Jimmy. Oh, sorry, have to bring back Gary. You know, Footy Burner says it's Jimmy. No, you have to bring back Gary. Have to bring back Gary Ablett. But the irony, if I did say Jimmy. But anyway, thank you all for watching. I really do appreciate it. Watch out for the next video. Like I said, maybe a Dustin Martin, Patrick Dangerfield concept trade. Who knows? Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye for now.